Hi, and welcome to the Man Myth Podcast. Episode 29,
29.
Leggo My Eggo.
Get through
Which were some
it.
of the best commercials back in the day.
Yeah. Let go of my ego. The reason I came up with this was looking at things that we hold on to that aren't good for us or no longer serve us. Things pop into my head all the time. Lyrics, commercials, lines from movies. It's just a crazy little spot in my head. I don't know. It's just,
But I mean,
it's
that's
been
a
like
good
that
thing.
forever. So when I was working with somebody last week, and I've talked about this um, probably on several episodes, but it's when people are in a relationship that this was what keyed it off to me. Was going through a relationship that isn't how does it go? They weren't ready to leave the relationship because they wanted to make sure the person that they were in the relationship was okay. So that
That's
and I walked through that with them, and it was an interesting dynamic because at some point you have to think about what's best for you.
right.
And that's kind of our nature, is to make sure that everybody else is okay. Seemingly first. And then that that was just it. Then that popped into my head, let go of my ego. Just it's not egos aren't nutritionally good for you. They taste fine. You can slather them up with a bunch of stuff, but they're not the best thing for you. But people, which was funny in the commercial, was they'd always fight over it, and then the little kid always ended up with it. It seemed like so. Nobody's there to steal it, and you just don't want to give it away. So that's where that came from.
I think it's a good analogy also, because it's not just like, I mean, relationships. Yeah, I think we've all stayed in relationships far longer than they were actually serving us or helping us or good for us. But so many things can be covered under this umbrella. It's every little thing that we do. I mean, I do tons of things that I know I need to just let go of and go away, but sometimes it's not that easy. And like I say all the time on here, we're not perfect. We are not doing this to say this is I'm better at you than this or I'm better than that. No, it's just we're just trying to do as I say, not as I do, because don't start following my example.
Well, you could, yeah, anything. A bad health habit, bad sleeping habits, jobs. You could throw just about anything, and those are all in essence relationships. But you can just about throw anything into that category that we hold on to things that aren't good for us. Um, and I know, job wise, I've been and recently I was in a job that wasn't. It really wasn't healthy, but sometimes we stay for the. Sometimes it's convenience, sometimes it's a comfort, sometimes it's a fear of what are we without that thing. And that gets more
Right.
into habits or um, how how we see other people seeing us. Um, and what I mean by that is like when you were doing your episodes and you were doing the chameleon thing, right? You were getting into that
Mm-hmm.
what you thought every other person thought of you, and at some point you had to say, well, it doesn't matter now, right? I'm just letting go of that.
Right.
And so that's kind of where I see these things that we hold on to being really detrimental to our lives.
And there's so much. I mean, this episode could be 7 hours long because, and it would just be, it could just be a list of me naming all the shit I need to stop doing. But I mean, we all have bad habits, even if they're not necessarily detrimental to our health, but they're still not good for us, or things we should, that aren't helping us further ourselves. And but it's just it's one of the tougher ones. I feel like always letting go is always tougher than picking something up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of the letting go. Is it's the toughest part of the whole of every situation where you have to let something go. The actually letting it go is the hardest part.
Yeah. And I mean, the actual letting go part is fairly easy. It's the reason behind it or the value that we give it. Trying to justify or validate that. So it's like if you think about just as simple as when we used to when we were at the Upper Peninsula and we jump into Lake Superior, right? It's freezing cold. If you kept thinking about it and thinking about it, you wouldn't. You'd rationalize why you wouldn't jump in. But if you
Yeah.
just jump in, the first shock was fine. After that it was fine. And I think a lot of times when we try to
Right.
let go of something, it's the same way. Um, it's if we look at it, we try to value it. We see, we plan things, we make notes. You know,
Yeah.
just absolutely letting go of it is really a skill.
We have a bunch of
And
steps that we can
right,
take to let go of it instead of just doing it.
right. How many times have you heard somebody say, "Well, I'm going to start my whatever on Monday"?
Right.
Right.
My diet starts on Monday. I got to get a weekend
Right.
and before my diet.
I want to eat as much as I can on Sunday because, but by that time you're like, well, I already blew it, so let's wait until next Monday, kind of thing. But I think I mean, that's an easy one to see, but there are tough ones that take a lot, like work. I mean, if you leave your workplace, what are you going to do for money, right? In that situation, you'd have to have,
Right.
well, you wouldn't have to, but it'd probably be best to have another plan or something to go to.
Right.
Um, depending on the severity of the toxicity of the environment, let's say. Um, so having that is again into that thing about waiting to jump into the lake, right?
Right.
Well, how am I going to pay the bills? What am I going to do? What is this? What is this? But when we get to a certain level, we talked about this, I think, last episode. We get to that point where something dies, and then we reinvent ourselves with something else, or we start anew. And the new isn't
Right.
like back to basic, way back. It's back just a little bit so that we can have because we already have the knowledge, experience, and all the stuff because we've done it time after time. But those are the things that I think are important to kind of evaluate and not just like rip the band-aid off of everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I was there with work before. Um, I ended up getting laid off instead of getting out when I probably should have, but I overstayed my welcome. And but that month in between jobs was, it was a nightmare and a blessing at the same time, because yeah, I got to spend a lot of time home with my kids. I was doing better mentally than I had been in a long time. but then you have that in the back of your mind. You're like, okay, where's the next bill? Where's the next bill coming from? Okay, our savings is almost done. What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
When will I get another job? Will I get another job? Do I need to start looking for a job in another career? Stuff like that. Like, there's a million things, but I was actually happier in life, even with all of those worries, which
Mm-hmm.
made me know that it was a good thing that I got laid off. And then I started working at the company I'm at now, and something that I thought was like the worst thing that ever happened was actually the best thing.
And you had some
And we're
other
still getting
things
caught
like
up with everything. We're still getting back, but
the house and everything else too. Was I mean that was all new too.
yeah.
So it was a big shift. Um, and then the car, all the stuff,
Yeah, the
the
car
Land
blew up.
Cruiser,
Then we had the baby.
the
And
baby, the new
I
house,
mean, yeah, it was, I mean, it was, the universe was testing me for sure.
and that's
It was, that was all right, it's your time. This is go time. This is when you show what you're made of. This is when you get out of it or you let it overcome you.
But did you imagine like a work like you're in now? Did you imagine? I mean, you had imagined being a mechanic or doing the maintenance.
No, I thought, to tell you the truth, I was just expecting to be back in construction until I got the call to be a modernization. And then when they told me, I told one of the guys, I just mentioned it. I was like, yeah, I want to be a maintenance guy one day, because that, like, you get to see a bunch of stuff. You get to, like, work with everything. You're not on the same job every day. And like 2 months later, they're like, hey, you want to be our maintenance guy? And or my BA called me and said, you want to be a maintenance guy? And I said, with who? It's like, the company you work for. And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, I think it'd be really good for you. But I never in a million years dreamed that I would have gotten a maintenance job this soon at a company that, I've told them like 7 times, if they don't fire me, I'm retiring from this place. I'm never leaving.
Oh,
As
good.
long as they stay like this, I'll never leave.
Yeah, and I mean, but I remember you talking about that's kind of where your goal was, even in the other company, was to get to that
Right.
place. So when we look into, um, like with in the situation I'm doing now, and having, in essence, having to move from like almost the perfect place, right? Putting and some people pray about it, some people do vision boards, some people do different things, but and if you've ever listened to Abraham Hicks, you just put it in what she calls the vortex. And I think that's kind of what happened to you when you were like, that's kind of where your dream was. And then a lot of times when we do things, and I know this is probably the experience of some of our listeners, once you've like leave it go, then it comes to you because
Mm-hmm.
there's a resistance to it. And so what I've done is I've kind of just in my head thought about what I want. And I believe that it'll end up being here when I need it. That doesn't mean I don't make contingency plans, but it also means that once I put it out into the universe, let's say, and then let go of it, then I'm not trying to steer it and drive it. It's universe
Right.
takes care of it on its own. So if if we don't, in essence, let go of our egos, we're still holding on to something that isn't, let's say, productive or healthy for us. And that's part of the process that I see going on with this relationship that I'm talking about. Um,
Right.
and I don't know if there's some people have this hope that it's going to change. belief that it'll change, or and most of the time it isn't going to, whether it's the job, the relationship, because you're not going to throw. Um, People are going to be, when it comes down to the nitty gritty or the pressure, people are going to be who they are,
Right.
whether you're working with them or in a
Exactly.
relationship with them or even yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think you have to pay attention to people who people show you they are. You have to trust a liar to lie, trust a thief to steal, you know, because that's what they're going to do. And seeing that is not always easy because some people are better at hiding themselves than we are at seeing them. But I think that's one of, I don't know if you call it my sixth sense or my superpower, but whatever. I feel like I've always been a good judge of character because I find myself going, there's something off with that person. I don't know what it
Mm-hmm.
is, but I just, they give me the heebie jeebies. And then, yep, there's a reason they gave me the heebie jeebies. I get it now. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, he wasn't a good guy. I fucking told you that 3 years ago.
Right.
Nobody wants to listen.
And that's even when, like, if we turn it into our, like, internally, when we're the person that wants to please everybody else, which you and I have both been in that spot.
Right.
In essence, that's our ego. It's like, but if we can get the courage to be honest enough with ourselves early enough, it'll save us a lot of pain and a lot of money a lot of times,
Right. Yep.
because the way the way I see, especially, let's just kind of throw it at work, because I've had employees before that cost me 10 times what I was paying them, whether they were just
Right.
not doing the work, or they were doing negative stuff, or they were doing stuff that wouldn't bring people into the office, that kind of thing. And in that case, my ego is trying to be the person to help them change, right? Or avoid the
Which is
pain of
never an
having to
easy.
rehire. But that's what costs us part of, and in essence, like, it's little parts of our soul, I would say. um and that's
Which costs way more than money.
right. Right. So those things are the things that I saw when I was just talking about this, and that, what is the ego that you're holding on to that you can release? And, like, releasing it, like, you say it's hard, but I say it's easy. It's what's causing us to be that way. What's the core issue that's holding on to that? Like, people pleasing. We don't want to be
Right.
outside or lonely or by ourselves or be talked about behind our back, whatever it is. Why is why is that more important than our own, in essence, comfort or dignity?
Right. And yeah, I think, I don't know if I mean, I think I'm the person who talks themselves out of jumping into the lake, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I've, and it's still to this day, I will find myself, instead of letting something go or letting someone go or trying to move past it, I'll find myself being like, well, maybe just we'll do this once and we'll do this and then I'll do it. But I always have that like inner monologue of things. But once I get to that point, then you're right. Then it's very that last stage is easier, but I feel like getting to that last stage is the hard part for me. So maybe I misspoke, but
No, I understand what you're talking about because it is. I mean, that's most people's view on it. Because when I turn it into the thing about what's the cause or what's the reason that we're doing it, just letting go of something is pretty simple. It's the dialogue, which is the tough
right.
part, right? Um, Changing something, like if I was going to change my morning routine where I was going to do a walk before I did my water, whatever, something that's very simple, but it would be simple to do that. But if I was looking at it going,
Right.
well, what if I may need the water before I go for a walk. I don't want to get dehydrated, and I go through this whole process. And then by the time you almost get into this analysis paralysis where you just like, forget it, I'm just going to do the same thing again.
Yeah. Forget, I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm not doing
It's
it.
just, yeah. And it's crazy how I like that you use the simple analogy, because sometimes those are the ones that we talk ourselves. It could be something so, excuse me, so easy and simple, but then, like you said, we go, okay, well, what if? But if I need this, then I have to do. Oh, well, I can't do that. But okay, now I'll do. Well, and then you're like, you know what? Forget it. Forget about it. I'm not doing it.
All right.
And by the time I get there, then I've forgotten what I was supposed to be switching to in the first place. I'm just so aggravated with myself.
And I mean, even though I use a basic analogy, it's still metaphorically, it's still the same thing that we do throughout our lives. And that's one thing um, that this year has taught me is, and sometimes universe will do it for you no matter what, right? Like with you
Right.
and the job or me and the job. Relationships, it's just like, okay, I've told you enough. It's time for it's time for me to intercede. And you're like, and then it happens. You're like, oh, that wasn't so bad, right?
We just say touche.
We make it. A lot of it's the value that we give it instead of putting that value back in ourselves. Um, and I think that's where a lot of times people get into this, the ego retention syndrome. We'll call it that because everything has a
Everything
has a
just
name
gotta keep them.
anymore.
Yeah, but it really is like that, because there's so many things that we know is killing us, or we know is bad for us, and we just keep holding on to it, hoping, like you said, hoping it'll change, or hoping that it'll affect us in a positive way instead of a negative way. There's so many things that happen to us, or we let happen to us, that we could have, if we had let go of a certain thing, or we had, you know what I mean, if you had let go of that ego, then this and this wouldn't have happened. But sometimes that's what it takes. It takes that kick in the butt first to get you to let go.
And I think once you do it on larger, or it happens to you, like with your work, right? And even mine,
Yeah,
then
that
it
one got
shows
took.
us the value that we placed on whatever it is was not nearly, there was a lot more than what it should have been,
Right.
because you're happier now than you have at work been in a long time, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm working into something, um, building a business that's different, something that's more aligned with what I feel like I should do at this stage in my life.
And it's important work you're doing. And I think it's what you've been meant to do. I think without what's happened the last year or the last few months, I think that gave you kind of the push to do it,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
finally like get into it.
and it's funny how in the reinventing of ourselves, and that's again, if we go back to that point where we say something had to die, that job or that relationship had to go through that death, that emotional depth that we a lot of times we have to reach to bring in the new. And again, let go of the ego. If you're sitting there at a toaster fighting over an ego, and there's a eggs and filet mignon on the next plate, you're going, but this is what am I going to do if I don't have the ego? Well,
Yeah.
eat steak and eggs, right?
Yeah. You never know what's on the next table.
Or for Rhonda, tofu and eggs.
Tofu and egg. All right, I gotta have a talk with that lady. Tofu and eggs.
But that's when we hold on to that ego, a lot of times we don't understand, or we can't see what's past the ego. And a lot of times it's a ton better.
Right. It's almost like you see, you have two plates in front of you. One of the plates has a stack of Eggos. The other plate has a cover on it. But because you like Eggos, because this has something that you'll eat, you only get to pick one plate. So you pick the plate that you know is you'll eat. But then they take off the plate and you say it's like steak and eggs with a side of bacon and a nice big cup of orange juice. And then you're sitting here going, "Well, I've been standing here in front of these Eggos this whole time. I'm almost done eating them. I could have had steak and eggs this whole time."
Right. Now the big difference is if tomorrow the same
Bacon.
scenario comes up and you still grab onto the ego. Right.
You're right.
But that's a great analogy. I love that way that you talked about that. And moving out of the relationship that I was in, I got to meet me. I got into a different relationship with myself. And I think that's been a gift, and I like that. It's about time. But I haven't, in essence, not been taking care of somebody since, in essence, really when I was born. And I've always been taking care of somebody. Yeah. And coming up, I won't be. I'll be taking care of me.
Which is a scary thing. Well, not scary, but I don't know. I'd say exciting thing. It's a new. I guess every new adventure is kind of a little scary, but it's something you've never had to do. Like,
yeah.
It's something you've never gotten to do. Is just take care of yourself.
And at my level of understanding of it, it's not as scary. If I was like you
not all of us are as enlightened as you.
If you were 12, it would be because you wouldn't know what's on the other side. And I've had the energy work that I do and the way that I work, it also opens up those little avenues that says, how are you going to handle this? Is it going to be an opportunity, or are you going to hold on to your ego? Right.
Right.
And I just thought, when Spirit told me this is the time to get in a relationship with yourself, it's going to be you haven't done it in a long time. Find out who you are, work with your inner child and do all this stuff. And I got to a point where I was really good. And then I got to a point where I wasn't so good. So I asked, which is different.
Right.
You might fall over in your chair. Hold on. I asked for help from one of my mentors.
You serious? On
Yeah,
purpose?
on
Were you
purpose.
sick at the time? Did you have a
Actually made the
fever?
call or texted. No fever. But so me being me, I thought, I got this, right? And then when I asked this Wendy was she's one of my mentors, then I asked her for help. I was like, and it wasn't like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. It just opened up a little bit more, in essence, courage for me because I had somebody there with that was helping me, which is a totally different relationship than I have been in it forever too, right?
Yeah.
So it makes it, even though I was at this place where I was letting go of my egos continuously, I
Right.
was still holding on to the cause of why I would hold on to some things.
Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with not being the person that has to take care of everybody.
Yeah. And that's like you said, that's a being that person. You've never had to do that before.
You
You've
know,
never gotten to be that person before.
I have, but not in long times, not for periods. And
Right. Well,
so, in essence, what I was finding out that a lot of times I'd be in a relationship protecting somebody or doing something for somebody. And I can't remember who said it, but it said anytime that you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to yourself. And not on everything, but on something.
well, especially if that yes makes you compromise who you are, or you're saying yes just for that person.
Right. And
You know,
during,
if you would have said yes for yourself, then it's a little bit different. But
well, yeah, there's a part of no in every yes, and there's a part of yes in every no. So if somebody said something to me and I said no to them, I'm saying yes to myself in a certain situation.
mm-hmm.
Right. If I was
Right,
planning on going to dinner with somebody and somebody called me and says, "Can you give me a ride?" And I said yes, then I had to say no to me for the dinner. Right.
right,
But if one of the key factors, and I think this was what hit me, and I like bawled like a baby for a little bit, but I she, she said, "Why did you do that? Why have you done that all the time?" And I said, "I'm supposed to." And she goes, "No, you did because of who you are, not that you were supposed to do it. And don't put that on yourself as like it becomes work or
mm-hmm.
it's there's a difference to I was supposed to do that versus I just did that. And I did that because that's the kind of person I am. And the supposed to take some of that connection away, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah,
So
mm-hmm.
if it's like if I went to work and I did my job, I was supposed to do it. But if I did my work and like in chiropractic, I didn't just do chiropractic, I did other things. I was supposed
Mm-hmm.
to do
Yeah,
chiropractic, but I did patient care and
right,
I did all kinds of other things and I was present with the clients. And that was a huge distinction for me. instead of just saying I did it because I was supposed to versus I did it because it's who I am. It makes me feel a lot better that I did it because of who I am.
Well, and it's a huge distinction. It's a completely different ideal of doing something because you're supposed to do it and doing it because that's the person you are. Like I'll so I'm supposed to be a good father. Well, no, let me. I'm supposed to be a father to my children,
Mm-hmm.
but I am the type of father I am to my children because of who I am. Because I know plenty of fathers that are not like me with their kids. And I'm not saying I'm the perfect dad, but who I am has more to do with how I father my children than how I'm supposed to be. I don't
Right.
know if this is exactly the same or not. This is just how I was thinking about it because I'm supposed to put food on the table. There's certain things I'm like supposed to do for my kids. But then there's
Mm-hmm.
also these other things that I do for my children, like when I let Hadley paint my fingernails and put makeup on my face, or when I go out and play soccer with the boys, or when I take the boys to the gaming store for a guy's day. Like there's certain things that I'm not supposed to do them, but I do them because that's the type of father I am, because that's how I show my kids that they're number one. I don't know. I'm rambling again. I think I'm off
No,
topic.
it's exactly the same thing, and it's how does it make you feel being a great dad?
Oh, it makes me feel better than anything else.
Right. But if you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing, you wouldn't feel nearly as good.
No.
Right. So I think that's the
No, and I
big.
don't think
Go ahead.
I just think it's it's not because I get the like warm fuzzies every time like I do something like that with my kids or I bond with them, but it makes me want to keep being that man that does those things for the kids. So I think it helps build me up. So it's just like this stacking ability that keeps growing because then I do the things, then I feel better, then I want to feel better
Mm-hmm.
more, and but I know, but that's not my obligation to my children.
Right. And that's what it was really. That's what really got me emotionally changed with this is I said supposed to, and I was doing Akashic
Mm-hmm.
Records, and the record keeper said, "No, you did it because of who you are. Don't." In essence, I was belittling what I was doing, or belittling myself as not being open to that dialogue. Right.
Well, and like you were taking credit away from yourself for going that extra mile. For patient care is a huge thing. It's something, but it's another thing that makes you who you are. Because and if you took that away by putting supposed to in front of it, then you're taking away a piece of yourself with it.
Right. And that's the veil that I was hiding behind. That was another ego.
Was this supposed to?
Was the supposed to? I
Mm-hmm.
again, your analogy of being a dad is perfectly on plane with it because you couldn't where you are in your life, you couldn't be the supposed to dad.
Right.
But you could also say that being the dad that you are and still be behind the veil. And then it takes, like you said, it just takes
Mm-hmm.
some of the honor and everything out of it. And so when I felt that, right, somebody saw me as the person that or the record keeper saw me as the person that would do it anyway, and just opened my eyes
Right.
to it. You know, it was like the first time that you heard me say I was proud of you.
Right.
The veil was lifted, and that's the same thing that happens
Mm-hmm.
to me. And I'm like, I'm 62. I should have all this right together, but
Oh,
but that's
you'd think, but
the
no, we're not there.
beautiful thing of it is that I don't.
Right.
Right. That's the for me. That's where the beauty is that we talked about, I think a couple episodes ago, the death of the shaman, which I do shamanic work, and it tells me that I need to become a student again. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
how simple, and I could have been offended, but I wasn't. I was excited. I was like,
Well,
okay, let's get to it.
and that's the difference. I'm not mean to laugh, but I mean that's the difference between you and me. If I was doing shamanic work and somebody was like, "You gotta go be a student again," well, motherfucker, shit, God, be all huffy and puffy. But real quick before I forget, and I didn't even make this connection until like just now. Like, so something happened to me on Saturday, um, and it kind of, I never thought of it like how you're putting it, but it's kind of exactly what you're talking about. So, it was Friday night. We went over to a friend's house for Cinco de Mayo, and everybody was having a good time. But it was like 9 o'clock. We were like, "All right, we're leaving." So I'm leaving, and I talked to one of the Gray's coaches was there for baseball, and I said, "Well, Gray's going to be there, but I'll have to leave early to take Xander to soccer, and then I'll watch some of Xander's soccer game, and then I'll come back and watch some of Gray's baseball game, and then I'll go back to Xander's soccer game and pick him up." Now, the two fields they were playing on are like 10 minutes apart. It's not like I'm driving like 4 hours during all
Right.
this. It's like 25 minutes of driving. But one of the dads goes, "I don't know how you do that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And like, "I don't know how you just deal with them playing in because Xander goes to school in a different district than Grayson,
Mm-hmm.
so they play in different districts." And I was like, "What do you mean? That's like I got to do that." And they're like, "Well, I just don't know how you'd handle it so well." And I was like, it was just one of those things that I was like, I thought, and this goes back, I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing,
Mm-hmm.
but how I was doing it, I guess, is me doing it because that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think of it that like literally until just like 15 seconds before I started telling this story, I put this together. Like,
Nice.
this is the crazy thing about this fucking podcast is it just like Friday night we had no clue. I didn't even think about it. Like, I was just having a conversation. But people say that to me all the time. Like, I'll come home and cook
Mm-hmm.
dinner sometimes. Like, Ash and I split it pretty evenly, but sometimes I'll take the baby, whatever. But I'll tell guys, like, they're like, "Oh, what'd you have for dinner last night?" "Oh, I made chicken cutlets, I made mashed potatoes, I made some sweet corn, I did all this." And they're like, "You went home after you worked and cooked dinner?" It's like, "Yeah, why?" Like, "Oh no, my wife cooks dinner. If she doesn't have a job, she better cook me dinner." Well, first of all, I like cooking. Cooking always makes me happy because
Right.
it's just me time. And if one of the kids comes, like Xander's really into cooking now, so it's fun to
Mm-hmm.
like have him in there helping me, and it's just like a little bit of bonding time. It's not anything crazy, but it's like, "Hey Z, stir this, do this." But like hearing people say that, like, "Oh well, my wife should cook," or "I can't believe you cook after you work 10 hours." That's just it's just who I am, and I
Right.
think I can't imagine not being that way.
And that's
Like,
and
it's
that's what
foreign to me to be.
but it's even people that and that's what when people listen to this, I want them to understand you're awesome not because you should be. You're awesome because of who you are. And
Right.
You should love yourself for it. You have my permission to love yourself for being you, right? And I think
Well, and
when people
I
get
think
down
you.
and out, they're in the shoulds,
Oh yeah, for sure.
right? They're shooting all over themselves. And just if you just look at it a little differently, as you do that because of who you are, I think that changes the whole game.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people need to be unapologetically themselves. I feel like this day and age, we spend half of our time apologizing for being ourselves. And yes, if being yourself is making other people miserable, then that doesn't count. But if being you is not hurting anybody, or it's not negatively affecting other people, and like I'm a little kooky and I'm loud, and people just say that's Bobby being Bobby. Now I'm not loud at inappropriate times. I don't go into my bedroom when the baby's sleeping and start playing the banjo and clanging the cymbals between my knees. But you need, and when I was, before I started being the person I am today and acting how I do today, I didn't even know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know what type of person I was. I didn't know. All I knew was I had, to act this way, and then people thought it was fun. I had to do this thing. If I drank this much, I was a really good time. If I passed that, I was not a good time. And all these things just kept, I was never being me.
Mm-hmm.
There was always something in the mix that kept me, and like you said, behind the veil, but I like it shielded, because I didn't have the courage to let my own self out, which I don't wish on anybody, even my worst enemy. I hope that nobody has to deal with that ever. But being yourself and finding out who you are, and then putting that into the world and just saying, this is me. I love myself. If you don't love me, get the fuck out of my way, because I'm not stopping for nobody. And that's what I am. That's where I am now. And it's a really fun place to be,
Mm-hmm.
because it can should all over my shoulder, just come right off. Does not matter. And that's where I want to get people with this podcast. And like I say all the time, I'm not an expert. I am just an expert in what has happened to me and how I dealt with it and how I got out of it. And that's where we're going with this.
And that's why a lot of times I don't throw statistics out or things like that, because a lot of you can find any statistic to say just about anything. There's so much information. Um, and I think just speaking from the heart, and the little epiphanies that we have in our weekly lives and things like that's going to be the key, though, to reaching people that are just
Right.
holding on to that veil, right? Holding on to their egos. They want those
Yep.
egos. Let the frickin' egos go, right? Let that veil go. And you're never too old to change or to learn. Changing is
No.
simple. Thinking about changing is very hard. Right? Just jump into Lake
Yes.
Superior.
The contemplation of change is harder than the actual change.
Right.
It really is.
That's where the shoulds come in.
Yeah. Well, they should shut off. Get this should out of here. How many should puns can we come up with today?
Probably a few. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that I wanted to get through with this. And like I said, just life hands us things that sometimes we just pass by. And this was, whether it's a song, a movie line, or a commercial, an whole commercial that pops into my head. I listen to them now and I figure out why it's there, what it's happening, what the message is behind it, because it is important. And to figure those things out, universe is telling us things all the time, and that little voice in our head, which some people think is crazy, is actually very intelligent.
It's the sanest one of us all sometimes.
So my call to action today is, and this is kind of out of the left field, go meet a neighbor. Know who your neighbors are.
Oh, I just did that the other day. I know all my neighbors, but I did that the other day. We had a new one move in. I went and said hi.
Look at you.
Well, he's the only one I didn't know. He's literally right next door. I'm not going to not know the guy.
There you go.
He's a really nice guy. His name's John.
John?
His wife's Patty. I didn't meet his wife. She was out somewhere. I hate having to hold the cough for the mute button. Sometimes I don't make it, but my call to action is to stop I don't know. I'm going to have to think. Hold on. How I want to word this. I'm glad I can edit this out.
I don't know if you should. At least put it on the blooper reel.
Stop worrying. Stop worrying. That's what my call to action is. Because worrying, overthinking, and contemplation will stop you from letting go
of your ego.
Let it go. Let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. All right. I don't know. When did 9:15 start being late to me? I don't understand. I'm 37.
Well, it's like I always laughed at my grandparents years ago for like 5 o'clock. They'd be eating supper about 5 o'clock. I'm like, oh my God. That's funny.
All right. Just remember,
you are not broken and you're not alone. Love ya.
And we love you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
'Cause I can run, but I can't hide the feelings that I know I can't.